Okay, so I want to migrate my blog from a shared host on LunarPages to DigitalOcean. My site is heroicvirtuecreations.com, and LunarPages is like a GoDaddy. It's a shared host, but I need more power, and they're complaining at me I'm using up too much CPU because my blog's a little bit too popular. So I'm following the directions on a tutorial that DigitalOcean has on how to migrate your blog. And one of the things they want you to do is go into the control panel or cPanel for your shared site, go to the backup wizard, and it lets you back up various things. First though, I'm going to go to the file manager because they say to back up the WP content directory. So here's my site, my blog's just at the root level. There's the WP content directory, and I'm going to select compress because it says create an archive of it. So I want it, so create a compressed file on my shared host. They give you several options. Go back and check the directions, and they suggest doing a zip file, which is more the Windows zip rather than a tar file. I look to see where it's used later, and sure enough it uses a zip, so I want to compress it in whatever format it's going to be most useful later on down the line. Let's come back over here and we select zip. That name's fine, it's going to save it in the root location. This file is about 480 megabytes, so it's going to take a while. So skip ahead about 10 minutes. Here I FTP'd with FileZilla into my shared host. There's that file, 417 megabytes, that I need to now download to my local computer. So while that's downloading, it also says back up your WordPress database. So now I actually go into the backup wizard of cPanel. I'm going to select My SQL databases, or just go to backup, then select MySQL. And I got a bunch of things, but my blog is called Heroic2 Blog. So I saved that, not nearly as big. It's maybe, I don't know, tens of megabytes. Got about 11 years worth of blog posts, so it's a decent bit. So that's downloaded. I'm going to make just a little local folder on my own home computer where I can save off all these little files and artifacts. There's that zip file, 400 plus megabytes. So now I've saved off the WP content directory and the database. That's the main content of my site. Next, it wants me to set up a cloud server with LAMP stack on DigitalOcean following the Ubuntu server setup. Now, one thing to know is DigitalOcean can have several of these things, and they might be, this one's for Ubuntu 12.0.4. Well, turns out, whenever I set up the droplet, we're already at Ubuntu 16. So we're not even on 14, we're at 16. Some of these directions on this page are going to be out of date. But what I realize is I got to just now actually go set up a DigitalOcean server, a droplet. So I click promo code, and I know Entree Programmers has a $10 credit. So I applied that $10 credit to my, so I'm signing up for an account, punch in all my credit card information, and then once you do that, you're ready to create a droplet. You have lots of options. I go with Ubuntu 16, as you see, and then I'm going with the $10 a month size. I think that's a pretty good amount for me, a little bit up from the lowest level. Should give me what I need to run my fairly popular blog, maybe 10,000, 20,000 unique visits per month. Not super popular, but okay. So I'm keeping the rest of this the same. I'm in the US, so New York sounds fine. And the next thing it's going to do is try to figure out how to do an SSH key. And that's what we're going to do next, is try to figure out how to do the SSH. Alright, so to do SSH I need to make sure I have this one PuTTY tool. and wasn't sure if I had downloaded it, so I'm going to go get the full putty and install that. All looks fine. Fast forward, it's done, and go back and see now. How do I create this SSH key? I'm going to launch PuttyGen, and you wiggle your mouse over the area there and while you're generating it, and boom, it's going to generate a key. I don't want y'all to see my private key. So I've now done that. I've saved the key as well as the public key. So I got the private key PPK file, say new SSH key. And it's a little bit tricky because when you paste from that public key file, it's got some extra characters in it that make it not work. So that's kind of annoying. And this first time then when I try to use this as my public key, copy pasting for that file, I get errors. So you have to actually do it where you copy it from the public key generation itself in PuttyGen. It doesn't have those extra characters. So I choose a host name, wpblog.heroicvirtuecreations.com. My actual domain is heroicvirtuecreations.com, so I just put this WP blog in front of it. And it seemed like that was fine. It was a little confusing on choosing a host name. My site's not going to be at WP blog, her subdomain. So now I'm going to follow this, setting up the LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Following this guide to set that up, you need to use Putty and do a root login. So SSH login, and since the private key is on my computer, this should work to be able to SSH into it. So I'm putting in my droplet IP address, and I'm going to call it DigitalOcean Droplet. Going to save that session or save that configuration. Now just say OK on this. Now eventually I'm going to actually not want to SSH in as root. I'm going to want to make a user who's not root. But for right now, let's say I'm going to do a root login. I make a mistake in a little while here and don't use the new non-root user like it told me to. I kept using root when I installed stuff, and that was a mistake. So I'll point that out when we get to it. So I need to read about how do you set up this SSH session in Putty with the private key that I have in that file that matches the public key. So we're going to launch Putty again, load up that little partially completed configuration. They want you to go to data first and say who you're logging in as. We want to say root. And then we're going to go to SSH auth. And then this is where I will put in the private key file. So I'm going to go browse to where I had that private key saved from PuttyGen. Okay, this is looking good. I want to go back up now and save this as my DigitalOcean Droplet configuration so I don't have to re-enter this information every time. And let's go ahead and then open that session. It's going to prompt me for the password. This is the password I used in PuttyGen to create the public private key. This is so the private key file itself has a password. So I'm going to enter that in, and it's going to drop me in for the first time. Now I'm SSH'd into my Ubuntu box on DigitalOcean, and I want to continue now installing the different softwares. So here's where it says, hey, you should create a non-root user. And I do this, and I call him Devin. So I'm going to make a non-root user and give him a password. But then I failed to do some steps I should here in a sec to actually use that user when I install MySQL and PHP and these things. And I think something gets messed up with the configuration, it being under root. So I should have done this step for add public key authentication, and I didn't do that. I just did this other stuff so that he's got sudo privileges, so Devin can sudo in. I should have done this step 4. You should do this step 4. Don't be like me and just keep using root for everything. I'm going to have to go back later and uninstall MySQL after I install it. And I just thought this looked like a lot of work. Oh, I'll just use root and do everything. But then once I installed WordPress, it didn't work. I couldn't log into it. So I had to undo a bunch of steps. We'll see that in a little bit. Alright, so I go ahead and forge ahead, and this is fine. Installing Apache is good. So I'm going to update packages. And that's done. Now we're going to actually install Apache. Say, yep, that's fine. As much disk space as needed. And it's going to do a bunch of stuff. And then once it's installed, we should be able to go to the IP address of my droplet, and we should get that basic Apache configurations screen saying we've got a web server. And that's a success. So that's good. We got that going. Talks about how to find your server's public IP address. I don't really need to do that. Step 2 then, we got Linux, we got Apache, we want to do MySQL. Now the directions I'm following are for Ubuntu 14.04. I'm on Ubuntu 16, and so some of these directions are already out of date. One of the problems is we get an error. This package is missing. This is not available. I go search around for what's going on with that. It has to do with the version. It's like kind of the old way. And you notice this. People on Stack Overflow have found this already. So I'm like, well, what are the instructions for Ubuntu 16.0.4? And sure enough, there's a DigitalOcean link for that too that's updated for 16.0.4. So I'm going poking around seeing there's a bunch of different tutorials for all different versions, and it can get confusing pretty quick because some of the directions are slightly different. So I'm finding where I was at before, almost the same thing, but that's a slightly different line. It just says install MySQL, and it figures out the dependent packages it needs to pull over. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this is looking good. I already did Apache. I'm going to make sure I did the right thing. There's a firewall thing too that it says, and I'm like, well, I should probably do a firewall before doing other stuff. So I might just take a little digression and set up this basic firewall to allow SSH, because I'm afraid if I don't, I want a firewall. I need to allow SSH because that's how I'm getting in. I also want to allow Apache full so that it opens up those ports. Say, okay, it says this looks good. How about we enable that firewall? I still have SSH access and also web server access. So we've got that. Now there's this time zone thing to configure so it gets it right. I'm in America in Central Time Zone, which is Chicago. So Bam, we set that to the local time that's accurate. Now it says we should also do this Ntp synchronization. That sounds fine to me. So I update packages and then go ahead and install this Ntp. This swap file stuff, it seems like it's not recommended for solid state drives on the DigitalOcean uses, so decide not to do that. Instead, we're now going to use the new command for Linux 16.0.4 to install MySQL Server. And it does a bunch of stuff and says, give me a password for the root user. This is the MySQL root user to administer MySQL. So I give it a password. Now we're going to start interactive script. I'm going to enter in the password I just set up. So it says, well, should we remove anonymous users? We kind of want to harden this installation. Say, oh, okay, yeah, go ahead and remove anonymous users. Go ahead and remove the test database. That's fine. Should we reload some privileges? Sure, why not? It says, okay, it's happy. Okay, so now we're at the P part of LAMP. To install PHP, WordPress requires PHP runtime to run. Now remember, I'm doing all of this as root. I should be doing it as Devin, the non-root user. I'm going to put index.php ahead of index.html in the ordering as it says to do. I'm going to restart Apache. And that's done. Let's see how Apache's doing, and it looks reasonable. Alright, so now we're going to install WordPress. And I'm going to undo these steps because of doing all this as root instead of as Devin. I think that's what went wrong. But I want WordPress on 16.0.4, not Ubuntu 12, which is what it originally pulled up. Sure enough, we've got DigitalOcean separate page for WordPress on Ubuntu 16. Now, I've of course already saved off my old database and content files. So we want to edit this info.php and add in this little boilerplate to see if we can do the most basic PHP script. So we'll save that and let's go visit, hit that file, and sure enough, it's able to process that file. I go ahead and remove it. Alright, so it says we've done the LAMP stack. Sounds pretty good. Okay, now we need to do this Apache virtual hosts. And there's another mistake I make with this that I'll tell you about in a second. First of all, note here that the main thing on how to set this up, it differs based on the version. Ubuntu 16 versus 14 versus 12. So first I'm going to come in here and say I'm going to create a MySQL database and user for WordPress. I'm going to log in as my root user to MySQL. And I'm going to create a database. It's going to be my blog database. I'm going to replace that WordPress default name of the database with my own name I want it to be. And we want to grant permissions to the database on the database user. It's going to use the name WordPress user. I'm going to change that to something else, and also you got to give it a password. Okay. So we are going to customize this to be what we need it to be. I'm going to put in password, etc. And pause briefly there. Alright, so I just did that command that was customized with my own password. Now I'm going to download some PHP extensions that are needed. Restart Apache. So I'm just following the steps here on how to install WordPress on a LAMP stack with Ubuntu 16. We want to be able to update htaccess. And come in here to the Apache conf and in this directory var www html allow override on that. So just punch in that information, save that file. Then we're going to enable rewrite so we can utilize the WordPress permalink. Make sure we haven't hosted Apache and restart Apache to get going. Now it's frustrating, I'm going to have to undo a lot of this and redo it, but it's because I'm doing everything as root. I don't recommend that. Go ahead and use this curl to get the latest WordPress and then extract it to create the directory structure into a temp directory. Alright, did that extraction. First we'll put in a dummy htaccess file and chmod it so that we can have permissions for it. And we'll use a sample wp config, name that into our as regular wp config. So we're just in the temp directory setting up the folder structure and basic files that we need for WordPress. I'm going to make an upgrade directory within it, and now we're going to copy this whole directory tree from temp to var www html. So did that. Now I'm about to mess up here because this virtual host, if you see it, sites available yourdomain.com. Well, in 1604 that's yourdomain.com.conf. So I end up reading the wrong directions for previous versions, as you'll see. So first I'm just going to copy over that WordPress directory tree. Now it should be in var www html. Now I'm looking back over on this, what to do with my non-root account. Switching user to Devin, which is my non-root one. And I'm trying to set up this user the way it told me I should and that I had ignored. And we're going to put in that same public key. Paste it in there. Looks pretty good. Save that. Now I should be able to SSH in to my DigitalOcean Droplet using the non-root user Devin rather than the root user. So we don't want to kill ourselves before we know that we can actually SSH in okay. I forgot to type service SSH restart. Okay, so we're going to relaunch PuTTY. I'm going to use the existing droplet that's root as a template to create a PuTTY configuration for the non-root user Devin. So we'll load that up. I'm going to switch over and change root to Devin. That's the username. Go make sure that SSH auth has the right private key file. It does. So I'm going to go and save this as a new session. Punch in Devin at the end of the name. It's a new configuration. Save that. So I got a root one and I've got my non-root user Devin. Go ahead and log in, same password. Now I want to configure the WordPress directory. Instead of Sammy, I'm going to use Devin. Now there was one other mistake that was made, and that was that whenever I copied that WordPress directory, it said to do it to var dub instead of var dub HTML. In the newer Ubuntu, they recommend putting it in var dub HTML /. So some of the DigitalOcean directions say var dub, some say var dub HTML. You want to make sure you do the right one. The var dub HTML is, I believe, the right one. That's for Linux, Ubuntu 16.0.4. So this is chmodding these various folders in WordPress to give access to them, since they need to be modified a lot of times, upgraded. You want to use the theme editor. You have to add secret salt keys, and so you just follow the steps here, and it spits out these salted values, which you'll then copy into the file it says. Okay, and then in WP config we also want to set our WordPress username, our WordPress blog name, add in this define method here at the end. So do all that, and now theoretically you complete the installation through the web interface. We'll find out whether that works in 1 second. Okay, punch in my IP address, still this Apache thing. So it says just put it in, but because I've kind of goofed stuff, got stuff in the wrong directory, some of it's in var dub, some is var dub HTML, so I'm going to punch in WP login at the end of this, and it's going to be messed up. Error establishing DB connections. Like WordPress is sort of installed. This whole site's available thing, right? It doesn't have the heroicvirtuecreations.com.conf. I'm using the older Ubuntu just with .com file, and to set up the virtual host. And look at this information here. It says the document root should be set to var dub instead of var dub HTML. Okay, so I'm going to put in heroicvirtuecreations.com. Now that document root needs to be var dub HTML. And this file needs to be sites available heroicvirtuecreations.com.conf. So this is a mistake that'll bite me later and lead to a lot of confusion, because I'm going to have the files in one location, but I'm pointing at the document root for heroicvirtuecreations.com to another location. So it's going to get messed up. So it's saying can't select database. I'm confused as to what's going on. I've got a messed up configuration at this point, and got to figure out what's going on with this. So I suspect that maybe installing as root versus non-root might have been a mistake. So I start to look and see what's happening with that and decide I've probably messed up, and after trying some things that didn't work, I'm just going to delete the database. I'm going to delete the users in the database. So we're dropping the whole database. Trying to figure out what to do. Drop the database. Let's view the MySQL databases. See if it really did drop it. I think I probably missed a semicolon at the end of that drop database call. So let's put a semicolon. Now it dropped it. Let's get a status. Okay. Database is dropped. Select all the users and drop any users. And not really any users, so probably in good shape there. Now in this temp folder, it's where I extracted WordPress to. I'm going to wipe out that zipped file, had the latest WordPress. Notice I'm doing all this as Devon now, so I'm having to use sudo. I'm going to go peeking in the HTML directory to see what's there. And these are all these files that I extracted into temp and then copied over here. I want to wipe out most of these files because I'm trying to start with a clean slate, doing things as the Devon user. I don't want to wipe out anything that's special or that's important. So I'm just looking through these files. They're all pretty boilerplate ones that can be recreated when I reinstall WordPress. So I'll remove that index.php. Just have a few little things left now. License is boilerplate stuff. The README is boilerplate README. So now my HTML directory is basically clean. So I want to create a MySQL database and user once again for WordPress. This time doing it as the Devon user. Make my Heroic 2 blog database in MySQL. I grant those permissions again to on Heroic 2 blog, give it my password to the user I'm setting up. Okay, I'm going to switch that to my blog name, switch this to password I'm using, and we punch that in. So we're just going to follow the directions next. Flush privileges, exit, installing the extra PHP extensions that we need. And did that. So restart Apache, and then we're going to do this making HD access and some of these folders overridable. And go find it down here where we set the override stuff. We already got that in place. var dub.html, allow override all. This is the 16.04 directions, which are correct. Just be extra safe, I'm going to retype that in, which I did, and then saved it. And let's re-download WordPress once again. Do I have a temp folder? I do. Let's go download WordPress. Let's extract it. And there was already this folder under temp, so I'm going to wipe that thing out. It's prompting me to do stuff, so I want to wipe all this out that I'd already set up. Should be able to do rm-rf to force the deletion and do it recursively in this directory. So we wipe that out. Let's try again, extract that tar. Set up HT access again. Chmod it. Copy over this config file. Use that as the actual WP config. Make the upgrade directory. And notice now we're following the right directions to copy this to var dub.html, not var dub. So now we got WordPress files there in the right place. Assign group ownership to www.data. Use my username Devin. And set this group bit on the whole WordPress installation so that we've got access to it. Special access on the WP content folder. And we want the web server to be able to access these. Let's get that secret key generator again, generate these unique values for us then go into that file and add them in. Okay, let's try again. Now did it work? That's what we got before. We're hoping for a better result now. And it's somewhat better. Hey, at least it's got the WordPress setup. Kung Fu Power, Raiden shooting lightning. Thank you, Lord. I have no formal martial arts training, but watched some Mortal Kombat games. Can just fill in this information with the blog title, etc., my email address, and we're going to expect that we can actually log in now. The information we just set up. Hey, it's somewhat working. So this is an improvement over what was there before, but we still are going to have issues because of the .com file versus .com.conf file. So I've got things pointed to the wrong direction. So I'm going to this virtual host thing again. So I want to set up the virtual host to point to the right thing. Now this .com file is for old Linux, not for Ubuntu 16. So I make this mistake again. Now if you notice, I get a little bit smarter, but not much smarter. So I'm pointing to the wrong directory. I'm pointing to var-dub-dub instead of var-dub-dub HTML. Got the .com file instead of the .conf file. And now I'm trying to figure out, I say, whoa, 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 in Ubuntu 13, it has to have the .conf at the end. Now what I need to do is make that file, delete the .com file in the site's available directory. This caused me hours and hours of pain and hassle because I didn't realize it was still getting confused configuration from that .com file. I was doing the Ubuntu 12 directions, and Linux changed this. Linux, please be backward compatible. Don't break functionality as best you can. So I said, oh, whoops, okay, there's this .conf file. Well, that seems important. Now I needed to delete that other file, but I failed to, and so I confused my whole web server. I didn't know what to think. I got the .com and the .conf. Now you notice also, I realize in here that there's now a discrepancy. The different tutorials, one with point to Ubuntu 12, one Ubuntu 14, one Ubuntu 16. Here's the wrong directions that I continue to follow like a blind lemming. Say, well, maybe if I try this again with the .conf file, things will work better. And they sort of do. Also like, hey, wait a second. Shouldn't there be an HTML there? In my mind, I'm thinking that. Stupid web stuff. Say, does this look right? I don't know. Sure, I'll save it. This is not right. Should have HTML after the .dub. Should delete that other file. Yeah, I think that I've done something clever, and I really haven't. I'm going to reload Apache here and restore my backup from my blog. Tell this guy he's awesome. And yet it won't work right. It's going to be messed up. So I'm on Windows on my local computer, so I'm using PSCP from PuTTY, Secure FTP. PuTTY has that tool. It's not in the path, so I got to go find where this putty directory is. And did I already download it with putty, or is it part of the putty I downloaded already and installed? I don't know. There's PSCP. So I'm going to go looking for putty. And sure enough, in the install directory, I already have PSCP. So to make my life easier, I'm going to make a command shell, do a command prompt to this directory. Let's do it as administrator, because why not? Just in case. Oh, maybe it is in the path. Well, I'm going to change directory then into the directory where I downloaded my blog backup. The WP content directory is zipped, as well as my database. I'm going to try to build up the PSCP command here, so I'm switching directory into that where I've got those two files. And I want to ftpm user at my droplet IP : so I'm going to attempt this. It says doesn't know what SCP is. That needs to be PSCP. Should ask me for a password. I give it my password. And it uploads the zipped blog database from my existing blog. Go and have a soda. Smoke tobacco pipe. The other file, the WP content zip, because I have 10 years worth of blog posts and images, is 400 megabytes. So I need to do it next. Okay, it's done. Go set up the command for that backup. I also want to see that it, wait, where on earth did it put this file? Somewhere. Where's the home directory on Linux? Okay, it should be here in home. Devin, that's the user. And there's my blog file. So the FTP worked. Now I want to upload the WP content zip file. This is the 400 megabyte one. This took a little while. Go get a chocolate shake, snap into a Slim Jim, and once that's done, I want to restore the database using this command. So I've got my blog named this. I'm going to try to hydrate it into the Heroic 2 blog, which was what I named my blog, setting up on MySQL. That's what it told me to do. It's not going to work because it's not, it's zipped, it's compressed. I need to unzip that tar, or that GZ. Okay, now I've got a Heroic2 blog.sql. What if I use that instead and try to hydrate that? It's probably MySQL. This is a MySQL password. I enter that. And does it work? Maybe. It's thinking. Hopefully. Did something. Okay. Well, now notice this command, which is for old Linux, is restoring this, copying this WP content to the var dub directory, so the var dub HTML. This continues to plague me, though I didn't realize it. Very frustrating, confusing directions. This thing needs to be updated to new version. I don't even have unzip, so I gotta go get unzip. So Google's your friend. Google for errors that you hit. Sure enough, here's how you get unzip. Not too bad. So we're unzipping this thing into var_dub_dub instead of var_dub_dub_html. So that's a mistake. I'm going to go off and get a soda. Okay, I'm back. I didn't really drink a soda, way too much high fructose corn syrup. I'm editing my hosts file. This is on Windows. In order to point, hey, local computer, if you go to heroicvirtuecreations.com, instead just go to my droplet. I want to, before I actually change anything over of DNS on the web, I want to just try locally to see whether I've done things right. Guess what? I've not done things right. Got WP content in the wrong location. I've got the .com and .conf files and sites available. They're pointing to var_dub_dub instead of var_dub_dub_html. So I've made several mistakes here. Dramatic irony that you know that, but I didn't at the time. So there's my droplet address. And then once you do this host file, you need to use Notepad in admin mode, administrator Notepad. Otherwise it says I'm not going to let you save it. Won't let you elevate it on the fly. So copy that, got to close this, don't save, relaunch Notepad as administrator, open up the host file. This is different on Linux and Mac, different directions, but DigitalOcean tells you how to do it on those. Go find that host file again. And it's located there. To open it up, my admin prompt, come back over. That's the line we want. Then I'll do ipconfig, renew, and release, and there's netstat this and that. There's ways to try to force it to reload. It's supposed to just work, but sometimes it doesn't. There's like caching in your browser. Want to make sure it took the changes. Go to heroicvirtuecreations.com and look what I get. There's an HTML folder and a WP content folder. Now that doesn't look right. That's supposed to be my blog, but it's pointing to the www directory. WP content's in the wrong place. At this point, I'm confused. I'm like, why is WP content out by itself? This seems very weird. I'm reading what it said. Now this is Ubuntu 16.0.4, and look, it says hydrate it into HTML directory. And at this point, I'm just like, okay, it's the wrong directory that I put it in. This is annoying, but that's life. I'm saying where it is supposed to go, var_dub_dub or var_dub_dub_html. So we got two different sets of instructions. And sure enough, other people have asked the same thing because there's confusing directions that conflict with each other. He ran into the same thing. Any folder will work, just have to be consistent, but the new default is HTML directory. The one-click WordPress installation does that. Well, maybe I wanted to do that, but I wanted an HTML directory. So it says, hey, you can update the conf file. Starting to dawn on me that there's confusing directions. So I'm saying, let me go back into that file, but notice it's the com file, not the com.conf. Sure enough, I just had dub. I needed HTML there. Now I forget though that this is the wrong file. This file should be deleted, so it just has the com.conf, which also is sitting there. The com.conf is pointing still to var dub and not var dub HTML. So this is still not right, and my WP content folder is still in the wrong place. It's late at night. I'm annoyed by this. I'm wondering, hey, what's in here? Yep, there's WP content. Said, well, what if I unzip instead into the HTML directory? It's like, well, do you want to blap over some stuff that's already there? Blap it all. Overwrite all. Now I'm confused still. Now there's just HTML, but when I go to heroicvirtualcreations.com, still in the wrong place. I notice in the log file, it's looking in var/dub/wp login instead of var/dub HTML wp login. So I know it's looking in the wrong place. And I actually end up using webmin. I don't show this. I download something called webmin, open up port 10,000, install webmin, and it tells me my configuration's wrong. So the problem was I had been editing heroicvirtualcreations.com file in etc. Apache 2 sites available instead of editing the heroicvirtualcreations.com.conf file, which is the newer one that we're supposed to use now with Ubuntu version 16 or 14 or whatever it is. So by editing heroicvirtualcreations.com.conf, now it was able to properly see that the heroicvirtualcreations.com document root should be this HTML directory. And that solved it, and then I was able to get to my website.